Today we're gonna be engine swapping this 2014 Audi S4. I've been procrastinating it and it's time to finally get it done and get this car running, get it resurrected and back to its former glory. So let's get right into it.
This 2014 Audi S4 suffered a catastrophic engine failure and has since been sitting in my driveway for 8 months now. In the previous video, we started working on the used engine that I bought from eBay, but then ran out of the specific parts that I need before the engine can go back into the car.
We need to pull these coils right here, pull them out, and then put the new spark plugs in to make sure that all of those are ready and good to go. I also need to make sure that the supercharger belt that's sitting right here actually fits. How does it go? Oh yeah, over the crank pulley and then kind of little mock-up right there. Let's get this engine done and let's get it in the car because I'm done waiting. I want this car running.
These coil packs are basically held by nothing but rubber, but they do like to get stuck. Therefore, I opted to use my bent needle nose pliers to pry them out. After removing the ignition coils from cylinder 3, 2, and 1, it was time to remove the spark plugs. Using a 5/8 spark plug tool, I cracked the spark plug threads and began to remove them one by one. This is actually when I found something that got me really worried.
I was in cylinder 2. Motor was definitely sitting somewhere and some water got in there. Hopefully the cylinder is good.
Now, off camera, I did take a borescope down into every cylinder and found no rusting or scoring along the cylinder walls, which was a really good sign. I proceeded to remove the spark plug from cylinder 1 and found another rusty spark plug.
With all that rust right there.
I quickly installed the new spark plugs on the passenger side and then moved to the driver's side of the engine.
All we have to do now is repeat the same process on this side. Oh, well, that one came out.
Once I removed the ignition coils on the driver's side, I pulled out the old spark plugs and tossed them out right away. Having a new spark plug sitting right next to me, I proceeded to install those and then pop the new ignition coils back in place.
We need to get the supercharger belt on. I have this VPS belt tensioner. So the VPS belt tensioner has a bigger pulley. So what we're gonna do here is a little trick that I learned, and we're gonna slide it over the idler pulley. Make sure that it's all seated correctly. Boom, that is nice and tight. These are some Ken Auto Performance test pipes that I bought not so long ago, and I wanna use them, try them out. So it's gonna sit something like this. Oh, there you go. Nice. Okay, sweet. So now we know that this one sits on this side. So there's a little gasket that goes here.
I figured the best idea was to put these test pipes on right now instead of having to struggle with them later once the engine was in the car. Starting with the passenger side test pipe, I put the new test pipe gasket on, threaded on the 3 nuts on the studs of the exhaust header, and got them tightened down. Then proceeded doing the same exact thing on the other side.
I need to twist this engine around 180 degrees because the transmission is supposed to go first, not the engine.
Luckily, I was able to borrow my friend's 1-ton cherry picker since not all of us own one. Setting up the cherry picker, I placed the legs on the floor, attached the post, and secured it with providing hardware. I then secured the hydraulic cylinder to the boom. Finally, I adjusted the boom extension to my desired setting and double-checked everything before rolling it closer to my garage space.
Now that I have the cherry picker out and ready to go, I need to pull the front bumper. I also need to pull the front radiator support. I only have a couple bolts holding it, so it's not gonna be a big deal. Literally the bumper just gonna come right off, and same with the radiator support. So as far as I understand, there's 2 brackets. One sits here, one sits on this side, and then the engine mount sits between that bracket, and then the engine will fit on top of these. So I think once we can get the engine in, we can put the engine mounts in, and then we're gonna put these brackets on and sit the engine down on the subframe.
I elevated the car's front end and placed it on jack stands. Then we lowered the subframe as low as we possibly could to maximize our workspace. With some elbow grease, we rotated the engine and transmission 180 degrees. Then we got it into position and gradually pushed the engine and transmission forward until the transmission was almost aligned with the transmission mounting points without the use of any cuss words.
Don't pay attention to this. This is OSHA approved.
Don't ever use an oil cooler as a means of supporting a transmission. Because my secondary jack was not tall enough, we improvised instead of using a piece of wood. I proceeded to install the transmission mount and secure it to the frame of the vehicle.
The drive shaft is lined up, and we have temporary trans bolts all around. What we're gonna try to do next is put the engine mounts on, bolt up the subframe, align it properly, and then drop the engine on the subframe and position it. she should be sitting right where she needs to be. And then harness time, right?
Well, it's time to reconnect the cables on the passenger side of the vehicle. There are actually 3 separate grounding connections that need to be bolted up to the frame rail. After aligning the engine mount with the engine bracket, I secured it in place using my 1/2-inch impact wrench to torque it down. As I was attempting to secure the alternator, I soon realized that I actually couldn't connect the starter cable or the alternator harness cable with the alternator mounted up. So I quickly removed the alternator again, reconnected the cables to both the starter and the alternator, and then bolted it back onto the car using a 3/8 ratchet to torque the 4 bolts down.
So I definitely stayed up working a little late last night. That's why I'm having my morning cup of dad fuel here. The engine is in, so that's the great part. The issue is that the wiring harness is definitely gonna be a little pain in the butt. So let's get right to it, guys. We're actually gonna start by pulling the supercharger right here because there's a lot of plugs in the back that I need to button up, and then the blower is just really in the way. And this would be a good time to check how everything looks underneath again, just to make sure.
To remove the supercharger, I needed to remove 6 of the 13mm nuts, a few electrical connections in the back and the front of the blower, and then also the supercharger belt. I just needed more access to the harness connections, including the O2 sensors and a few other electrical plugs. Fortunately, there was just enough space between the engine and the firewall for me to reach in and connect all the necessary components. Despite the harness being typically intimidating on any engine, I was actually initially concerned about encountering problems. However, after working on it for about 5 minutes, I realized that it was simply a matter of solving a puzzle where every piece has its own place. Fluids like oil and coolant should be done last, but I added liquid moly 5W40 oil to the engine before completing any other tasks. I thought by doing so I could identify any oil leaks and promptly address them while I still had space around the engine. The passenger side engine mount had already been tightened up, but the driver's side still needed attention. I used the cherry picker, raised the engine until I could secure the driver's side engine mount to both the subframe and the engine. Once secured, I lowered the engine onto the subframe, and now it was properly positioned.
I think the hardest part about finishing a project is the fact that you have another project in the background. The best way to learn about a car is to just take the engine out, take the trans out, and put it back in, and honestly, that is what it takes.
Prior to reattaching the front radiator support, I realized it would be an excellent moment to introduce my mini-me to his first engine. I'm unsure if he understood anything at all. However, it is essential to start somewhere, and the sooner the better.
This is the supercharger.
Perhaps in the future, he will help me find the 10mm sockets that I keep losing. It's finally time to install the radiator support. I managed to align it and temporarily secure it with 2 screws at the top. Then I began plugging in all the radiator hoses, taking advantage of the space I still had. I went underneath the vehicle, realizing that I still had a few plugs that needed to be connected to the radiator fans. While I was there, I also made sure to connect the secondary air injection pump and the horn. The radiator support itself is held in place by 6 16mm bolts, 3 on each side. Since I removed them multiple times before, I tend to tighten them more than the recommended torque spec. Unfortunately, while tightening them up this time, I accidentally nicked the support bracket on a sharp corner and cut my finger. I keep learning the hard way that wearing gloves is absolutely essential, especially when working on a car. Thankfully, my wife patched me up with a band-aid and I got right back to work. After tightening the 3 bolts on the passenger side, the radiator support was finally in place. Before installing the crash bar, I decided to respray it with some black spray paint. This honestly should be the first modification that any Audi owner should do with their car. However, I suggest using black truck bed liner instead of regular spray paint because it will last much longer and it will never chip. While waiting for the crash bar to dry, I decided it was actually the perfect moment to complete the heat exchanger install. Now, supercharged Audi models are notorious for heat soak issues, so I would highly recommend upgrading to a larger heat exchanger, such as a heat exchanger from Merc Racing. Unfortunately, they were out of stock at the time, so I opted to reinstall the stock one just to finish the cooling system setup. Really easy to do as it's only held by 1 clip and 1 T30 screw. I proceeded to connect the high and low pressure AC lines to the condenser. I proceeded to work on the cooling system by starting the plumbing. Instead of relying on the small and restrictive 5/8 hoses that came with the vehicle, I opted for larger 3/4 hoses to improve the system's flow and capacity. The process was honestly pretty straightforward, as I only needed to ensure that the coolant flowed in the correct direction. Additionally, I retained the spare coolant reservoir to maximize the coolant capacity. Finally, I tightened the 3/4 hose clamps on the heat exchanger inlet and outlet connections. To fill the cooling system, I started with the primary coolant reservoir and then topped off the auxiliary coolant reservoir. With the coolant system now fully topped off and crash bar installed, I finally felt one step closer to completing my project car. I decided to take a short break and get some gas for my S4 as I had 8-month-old ethanol blend still sitting in the tank. I'm introducing to you guys my trusty 2000 Nissan Quest, aka the GTR, which actually has served me as a work van for many years. Despite its mileage of over 198,000 miles, it still runs quite smoothly thanks to regular maintenance of the engine and the transmission. After filling up my MTVP racing jugs with 92 octane gas at Chevron, I headed back home.
So we got the battery charging right now, and I got the fuel draining, all of the old E40, whatever I had in the tank. Integrated Engineer has this great option where you can drain the fuel, so it runs a low pressure fuel pump and pumps the fuel all the way up here. You just disconnect it from the high pressure fuel pump side, put a container, and bam. So currently just draining as much fuel as I can out, and then we'll get to priming the engine with fuel. Give me a fist bump. Boom, let's go.
After draining the old ethanol blend out of the gas tank as much as I could, I filled up the car with 5 gallons of brand new 92 octane.
As much as I wanted to get this car started and running today, have to charge the battery first. I checked the voltage and it's around, I believe, 10.5 volts, so quite low. I don't want to start the car.
If you're an Audi or Volkswagen technician, low battery voltage is a big cause for concern. The ECU may not function properly and there might not be enough voltage to start the fuel system or the entire engine, which requires a minimum of 11.5 to 12 volts. It's risky to even attempt jump starting these cars because it could potentially damage the entire electrical system. Instead, I decided the best course of action was to charge the battery overnight and wait until it was fully charged before proceeding with anything else.
The battery voltage is up to spec, but yeah guys, see you tomorrow.
Upon checking the battery the following morning, I discovered that it was fully charged. I then proceeded to flash the ECU and TCU back to the stage 1 files from Integrated Engineering, since I actually lacked the necessary hardware such as bigger pulleys or an upgraded heat exchanger for any stage 2 files. However, after flashing the appropriate tuning software, I did notice a strong smell of fuel in the air, prompting me to investigate the issue. Here's what I found.
So I got the high pressure fuel pump primed, and I noticed there's some gas leaking. So that's a little unfortunate. What I'm gonna do is just take the high pressure fuel pump off and hope that it's nothing serious. Thankfully, I do have a spare one sent somewhere over there. So I am gonna replace this and see what happens.
Removing the high pressure fuel pump is actually a quite simple task. To begin, I detach the fuel lines to release any fuel pressure and also use some rags to absorb any leftover fuel that has sprayed all over the engine. Next, I unplugged the 2 sensors located on the high pressure fuel pump housing, followed by loosening the last 2 10mm triple square bolts that secure the fuel pump in position.
Okay, I think it was clearly leaking from the housing right here. So this pump must have been opened before, maybe?
I'm not sure why that high pressure fuel pump housing was leaking. Maybe it's been opened before or somehow damaged. Either way, I had a spare high pressure fuel pump sitting on the shelf, and that was my next best option. The installation was as simple as the removal. All I had to do now is reprime the fuel system.
Now, I think most of you Volkswagen and Audi owners will know when you replace your high pressure fuel pump, you need to prime it. The way you do that, you hit the ignition on button.
Once you turn on the ignition, the high pressure fuel pump will start building fuel pressure in the fuel rail. Otherwise, the engine wouldn't start without any fuel pressure whatsoever.
I do it usually like 3 or 4 times. And then once we get this process done, we're gonna try to start it, and then hopefully it starts. I do have only the test pipes on. Down pipes aren't on, nothing is on. I just want to get this motor started. That's the most important thing to me, because if this doesn't start, then I don't know what I'm gonna do, but we're gonna get it started. It's gonna be really loud, at least for me.
I cannot explain the happiness I felt when this engine finally started up. After 8 months, my S4 was actually running with the new engine in it, and it was good to go. Definitely doesn't sound too perfect, and what I mean by that, there's definitely some odd noises going on. At least she started, and that's what's important. So I got to get a couple things on. You got to get these axles on, make sure that everything is connected properly. Once I removed the wheels from both sides of the car, I proceeded to install the axles to the center differential. I'm actually quite pleased that Audi chose to use a bolt-on style axle because they're quite easy to remove and reinstall. Each axle has 6 10mm triple square bolts, and to ensure proper fastening, I applied blue Loctite to each bolt. After threading them in, I torqued them down to the proper torque spec. Then I repeated the same process on the other side. At this point, all that remained was to attach the front bumper, install the wheels, and lower the car to the ground. Well guys, she's all buttoned up. Methane injection is plugged back in. It's all connected. So the coolant level looks good. There's no oil leakage. Oil level looks good. We're gonna start the car back up again, see what is going on. Hopefully it sounds good. Hopefully it's running good. Look at that. That does not smell good. Believe it or not, that loud tick is actually completely normal for these engines. She's running pretty happy, guys. I'll be honest, I can't believe that it finally happened. And in my tiny garage, I was able to pull an engine out and put a new engine in. What a relief just to have it running. It's insane. So here I am trying to take it on a drive. And, what? The timing couldn't have been worse as it snowed the next day and it was super cold outside. I had to crawl back into the car and investigate the issue with the shift linkage because clearly the car wouldn't go out of park. Upon lowering the transmission, I immediately discovered the first error I had made. If you look up there, you can kind of see this shift linkage right there. And essentially, there's supposed to be a little clip that holds that shift linkage into place. Otherwise, it won't get out of park. So all I was missing was this little shift plate or whatever you want to call it, clip that's supposed to sit right there. I found it. It cost me $50 from Audi, but I do have it in hand here. So I'm gonna put that on and then we'll get back into the car. I gotta get the downpipes back on. I gotta secure the tranny and so forth and so on. So let's get that done. I got the shift clip on, so I have to take this off because I have to unscrew those 2 bolts right there, and there's also 2 in the back. Let's see if it will shift. Reverse, neutral. After repairing the shift linkage, I buttoned up the transmission and reinstalled the downpipes, ensuring that I also install the stock X brace that stiffens up the subframe. Off camera, I got back into the car and attempted to shift gears, but encountered another issue where the transmission would shift, but the clutches wouldn't engage, meaning if I put it into drive or reverse, it wouldn't go forwards or backwards. It dawned on me that I made another mistake. I had to get back under the car to fix it. After lowering the exhaust, let me show you guys what I found. I realized my mistake. You guys can see where the position of the drive shaft is. Apparently when I was putting the transmission in, I didn't put the input shaft correctly into the drive shaft. Anyways, that's kind of what we're working on. Well, that's the reason why my car wasn't driving. With the drive shaft mounted over the input shaft properly now, I secured the drive shaft mount itself and reinstalled the exhaust. Unfortunately, my camera failed to record any sound during this process, but when I got back into the car and shifted into reverse, the car went backwards. I was thrilled to finally hit the road and experience the power of the supercharged 3.0 V6. Cannot believe this car is alive. Oh my goodness, like that sounds so good. I love how the turbo and the 810 sounds in the SQ5, but this supercharger whine, man, do I miss it. Oh, it sounds so good. I have never felt this good about myself in my entire life. Like committing to a project, getting it done, everything is running perfect. I'm so happy this car is finally running. What are we gonna do next with it? Honestly, I don't know yet. A lot of things are at play, future projects, SQ5, and a couple of things that I have in the works, guys. So, well, we'll see how it goes.
ever miss that. Oh, that sounds so good.